HERO stands for Healthy Ecosystem Restoration in Oxfordshire. And it's a programme that seeks to draw on the expertise found around the county, whether in individuals, in community organisations or in NGOs, and couple that with the academic expertise that the University of Oxford has to work together to develop models for sustainable nature recovery across the county.
HERO is a tremendous initiative, and what we've seen by getting together and discussing our different specialties is that we do have a very clear idea of what plants and animals we already have in Oxfordshire. They've been well mapped out. And there are two major threats in Oxfordshire itself. And one is chemical use in the industrial farming that we have in our area. And the other is land use change, which is really the urbanisation of our district. As soon as you bisect a piece of land, you've divided it in two. And now the animals and the plants have half as much space to live on. They get into smaller and smaller islands, and you have local extinctions. But what we should be doing is subverting that, turning it upside down, in fact, and saying we plan first to get nature back. And then once we have that vision, we can work towards it. You know exactly what you're going to do. You know exactly where you're going to go once you have a really, really clear plan.
The Environment Act 21 laid the groundwork for government to mandate the creation of local nature recovery strategies. Oxfordshire's local nature recovery strategy has been brilliantly led by the County Council in partnership with the Local Nature Partnership and a wide range of other stakeholders, including farmers and wildlife charities. Oxford University has played a crucial role in the creation of the LNRS, and the Leverhulme Centre has provided support in analysing the consultation responses. We received 2,000 responses to this consultation from a wide range of residents of Oxfordshire. So we really end up with the priorities for nature recovery that people want to see. Alison Smith's ecosystem service mapping has showed where wider environmental benefits are best delivered by habitat change.
So the initial maps came from some work we were asked to do by Cherwell District Council. They wanted to map their green infrastructure in Bicester. So with funding from the HERO initiative and then also with the Agile initiative from the Oxford Martin School, we've started expanding the maps to look at nature recovery opportunities more generally. The maps have underpinned work by Martha Crockett on accessible green space in Oxfordshire, which is of great interest to the County Council. It starts to look at the health and wellbeing aspect of the maps. We've also been able to draw on some valuable work by students under the HERO initiative, and we're creating open source Python code which will be available on GitHub, so anyone can download it and use it to create their own maps anywhere in England. So we're hoping this could be, because we're using this freely available data sets mostly from the government-owned website, that we're hoping this will be a really valuable resource across the country. Yeah, we're talking to LandApp about how these maps could be integrated into the LandApp system as well. So I think that would be a really valuable thing to do because it's widely used by farmers and other landowners, and they will be a key part of nature recovery, especially in Oxfordshire, where 70% of our land is farmland.
The challenge has always been as a family, how the hell do we keep the farm viable into the future? So I studied regenerative agriculture about 14 years ago and tried to implement some of those designs here on the farm, realised how difficult it was to do and thought there must be a digital tool out there that would help us in the process of designing the farm. Found there was nothing, and that's really where LandApp as an idea came from. So it's really complicated to design up a full plan that's really, I guess, based in science, and trying to do that on paper or Google Earth was just far too complicated. So what we've done in LandApp is we've basically sourced in all of the best data, then we've written models that basically help interpret that data into something digestible and understandable, and then with that information you can design easy plans. So the software is basically designed to give you the information that allows you to work through those complex issues in a very simplistic way.
Oxford University has been really pivotal in helping us understand, our direction, understanding what the science is currently saying and how we can best suggest to our users, the land managers that represent the rural landscape of the United Kingdom, and what they can do to better the environment. So they're really providing that scientific rigour behind all the different scenarios that we're suggesting to landowners. The project that we're working on in Oxford is really promoting biodiversity and the impact of connectivity on that biodiversity. Because ultimately, without that, biodiversity is really going to struggle.
So, throughout all my career in agriculture, which spans 40 years, I've been involved with the increased production of food from farming. And we've increased massively the amount of yield, but we've all noticed a decline in insect numbers, for example, and farmland birds. So the question for us is what we can do about that, what we can actually do to increase those numbers and still produce enough food. Farmland, of course, covers so much of the countryside. Over 70% of the UK is farmed in one way or another. Huge areas of grassland, big areas of arable. And it's these areas on which, if we make small changes, we can have a huge impact on increasing levels of biodiversity. It makes sense for us to grow our own fertility on this land and become more self-sufficient in terms of the way we farm. So how do we do it? And there's a lot of conflicting information for farmers. There's money for biodiversity net gain, there's money for food, there's one person saying one thing and one person saying something else. So it's really overwhelming and it's, I would say, very confusing. And one way in Oxfordshire that we've been able to address that is by getting farmers together. So we have an incredibly strong farming cluster with over 100 farmers now working together to discuss these really difficult issues to try and make progress to farm in a more harmonious way.
I spend a lot of time speaking with policymakers about it. My basic message to them is about the need now to get some clear standards so that everyone can know what good looks like to start helping.
We need to get on with this, but when we're getting on with it, we need to measure it so that it's monitorable and we can be rewarded properly for doing it. We can only do that if we have the numbers. And for some time I've been thinking, if only we could make the link between the practical farming in Oxfordshire and the massive resource that we have in the university, wouldn't that be great? Well, it's happening. So I think this partnership between the county's farming and the university in the city of Oxford has to be invaluable.
Knowledge is not a one-way street. There is so much to learn from practitioners in the field. And organic farmers like Tolly have been implementing and learning for decades.
We get a lot of people coming from Oxford to see what we're up to. If you ask a farmer what do they grow, they'll say, well, we grow crops. Well, in our instance, what we say is actually we grow biodiversity, and the crops, the vegetable cropping is a byproduct of that biodiversity, rather than the other way around. So again, it's about putting biodiversity first. Every plant has its own association with bacteria and fungi in the soil, and they're all different. So the greater the range of flora, the greater the range of bacteria, fungi, the greater the biological function of the soil becomes. And it's that biological function in the soil which enables us to gather nutrients, to maintain nutrients, and to keep nutrients from being washed out and leached into the water. So this interaction that we use, this very close relationship we have with the soil, is really dependent on biodiversity, particularly so in the fungi and the bacteria areas. And I think to ignore biodiversity on farms is really a recipe for complete and total agricultural disaster. Many countries are facing an absolute crisis in agriculture because of poor quality soil, because of loss of land due to erosion, because of really poor soil health. I think biodiversity is the only way to repair that. It's really good to have this interaction with academia, because we're able to demonstrate that a healthy farm does exist, and a healthy farm can produce very healthy food in a system which we are pretty sure is sustainable in the long term. So having these links with universities like Oxford to us is very important.
The HERO project has a huge emphasis on collaboration, and that's the main aim, to sort of pull everyone together who's interested in and doing research in this sort of thing, and sort of give that a lovely spearhead approach, and to tackle these really, really important problems in the 21st century surrounding nature recovery and obviously nature loss and decline. It was brilliant to work with farmers across Oxfordshire, and we really looked at a range of different farming practices and farming types. And we got some really brilliant data, and we're running through that data now in the lab. And it's just been brilliant sort of gauging farmers' opinions and their feelings towards UK biodiversity policy, such as things like biodiversity net gain. And we've done a lot of work with the Wildlife Trust, so Berkshire, Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire Wildlife Trust, BBOUT. We've got opinions of them in terms of how farmers can manage their land more sustainably and contribute to a wider nature recovery network, which is a really important principle that BBOUT are pushing, and it's a really brilliant idea. Basically, not just looking at conservation at the small scale, at the farm scale, but looking at it at the landscape scale, because biodiversity is captured and moves through the landscape. It's not just isolated on one tiny patch of land. There need to be habitat corridors such that biodiversity can actually capitalise on new biodiversity measures introduced by the government.
Welcome to Chimney Meadows. This is one of the Berkshire, Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire Wildlife Trust's really important nature reserves. It sits in the middle of Oxfordshire in the Upper Thames Conservation Target Area. It's also in one of the Wildlife Trust's living landscapes, the Upper Thames Living Landscape. So it's a really important area. It sits right on the River Thames, and it's a floodplain that surrounds the River Thames. One piece of research that the Wildlife Trusts are involved with the University of Oxford is looking at biodiversity net gain and how we can make it much better. And we're looking at the kind of levers, the policy levers that could be pulled, or the different sorts of things that are required to truly achieve really good outcomes for the environment and for nature, but also people as well. So making sure that local communities actually also benefit from biodiversity net gain. There's one site just behind me called Duxford Old River that we've acquired in the last few years, and we've got big plans for it to become our first habitat bank. So the idea is that we will be able to create some really lovely habitat here at Chimney Meadows that will help developers who have a requirement by law soon to achieve biodiversity net gain to compensate for the impacts on their developments. Why is this a good idea? Well, if we think about the status quo right now, developments do not need to compensate at all for their environmental impacts on habitats. So it's addressing a very specific thing about development. This is not the one silver bullet that will solve our nature crisis, and it certainly will not on its own support and bring enough funding for nature's recovery, but what we think is it's one important element to really address development to make sure that they are compensating for and going above and beyond their impacts to at least address their environmental impacts. So by bringing different perspectives together from both the research side of things, the policy side of things and the practice on the ground management, we can get a really great diversity of different disciplines, of different approaches to tackling some of these environmental challenges.
And so many opportunities lie at the local scale, whether in parish councils and community gardens or even at the scale of individual pavements, where people who care get together and do extraordinary things in bringing nature recovery to their local landscapes.
Everything we do costs money, and sometimes it's terribly difficult to raise money. TOE is Oxfordshire's independent fundraiser. So we have a wide range of projects that we fund, large ecological NGO partners across the county, community gardens and community orchards like the Bridge Street Community Garden up in Banbury.
We are basically a little oasis in the middle of the city, and the community is very involved, and a lot of people that live nearby don't have their own gardens. So they come here and this is basically their garden. We need areas within cities that provide food for pollinators. So we're very conscious of that, and we are growing flowers. And it's through spaces like this that a scientist from Oxford University did a session about pollinators. Trust for Oxfordshire Environment have recently given us some funding to grow wildflowers.
And actually, if you're a butterfly, these things might be close enough that they're providing very valuable stepping stones in an urban environment where there will be perhaps fewer pesticides or insecticides used than across the arable landscape elsewhere in the county. So it all adds up, we hope, to making a big difference for wildlife. Over the last couple of years, we've provided the data sets that we have about the funding that we have awarded to projects across Oxfordshire to the HERO project. I think putting together the data sets from all the different organisations working in partnership and for the benefit of biodiversity across the county helps bring together that big picture. So we hope that by doing sometimes quite simple things, people then understand more about the wildlife around them, what might be there now, what could be there if they do simple things, and the more you learn, then the more you're likely to fight for something when it's under threat in future.
Well, today we've been doing a biology field trip, and that gives us the opportunity to show kids things that they haven't seen before.
I think it's really important for adults in this age group to go into the woods because it takes what is quite a theoretical concept and makes it really real.
And we know that many species in the UK are under threat of extinction. But it's very hard for young adults and young people for today to really appreciate that because they haven't experienced it firsthand. They see what they see around them and they think that's normal. And that's really a hard concept to get over to people.
The university has the expertise and the capability to bring this knowledge and share it around this community. And I think this is really important in the current context of biodiversity declines and environmental breakdown, because we're not going to get people on board to want to protect and learn about and understand the natural world around them if they don't have this fundamental appreciation for the natural world.
What have you got?
Oh,
yeah, lovely.
We're in a biodiversity crisis and we need young people to understand what's going on but also care about that. One of the projects that I'm trying to work on is working with local schools to increase the biodiversity in their school grounds. The UK Department for Education has got a sustainability strategy which includes something that they're calling the National Education Nature Park. And the idea is that all schools enhance biodiversity in their space. And my feeling is that if higher education institutions can help schools do this by bringing some expertise, some support, some encouragement, we could make a fascinating case study across Oxfordshire. And the opportunity there is to not only enhance biodiversity and monitor the increase in biodiversity in school grounds, but also perhaps to look at what the impacts of doing so has on the children and the staff themselves. Wouldn't it be fantastic if we could actually correlate improving green space and nature recovery in school grounds with student well-being, maybe sort of indicators such as absence, and reduce the amount of absence that there is in schools at the moment. So I think there's a huge role for the university to play, and I'm really excited that we're doing that and to be part of that and to see what happens over the next few years.
It's an amazing opportunity to meet their holistic needs. They all get to come out and they learn about biodiversity through actually seeing, touching, and sensing it and being able to explore, and it's just a beautiful thing to watch them. It means something to them rather than it just being, you know, something they're told about on the telly or something. You know, their experience in our world out here. So they're basically being able to play, and they just get it. They just get that we need to look after our planet. And we love it. I love it.
It's been extraordinarily rewarding to build these connections between the University of Oxford and the local communities across the county to work together for nature recovery. And what I really hope is that beyond the practices we're doing within the county, we're really setting Oxfordshire up as an exemplar for how to implement and design nature recovery practices right across the country.